Oké, dus hij gaat iets laten zien, een experiment, een zogenaamd remote viewing experiment. Een experiment wat heel veel in het Stargate project ook is gedaan, en nog veel meer. Joe en Monaco was ook een star subject in het Stargate project. En het is echt, ik vind dat altijd een van de mooiste en indrukwekkendste voorbeelden van paranormaal functioneren. Dus Ed, go ahead.
I'd rather scream at you rather than speak quietly into the microphone. I hope that'll work. First off, Dick has a very strong idea of what to do next, and I honor that. The question is, what do you guys want? I understand.
We want everything.
So what do you want?
I want to give a reply on your question. Where is it all coming from?
Oh, that's at the Q&A session, so hold on.
Oh, okay.
Very good. All right, how many people want to see the laboratory approach with the video?
Yeah.
Okay, oh, very good, so we're done. All right, thank you. What I'm going to show here is kind of a schematic of how one in our laboratory would do a precognition trial. All right? And I love cartoons. So here we have a participant and a monitor in a room at 10 in the morning. No targets have been generated, so both people inside this chamber are completely blind to what's going on. So we conduct a very stylized 15-minute interview, the monitor will, with the participant. And here's the question is asked. I'll read it for you. Please access and describe a photograph I will show you in the future in about 20 minutes. That's the tasking, telling the remote viewer what to do, which is very, very, very important in these kinds of studies. But then still no target has been generated yet. So some fraction of the time, a miracle happens. She gets a mental image picture in her head and describes that in some detail. That's a recognizable picture as the Taj Mahal in India. But still, no target has been generated. So what we do is secure this data so she can't cheat, the monitor can't cheat, the data is now secured and hidden away. Then, the computer randomly selects from a pre-defined set, in our case 300 separate type of images, picks one randomly. Lo and behold. That is not an analysis. That's simply how we collect the data. Whether you think it agrees or it doesn't, that's how we collect the data. So how in the world would we analyze something like that? Here's a real set of data, nothing hidden, from an Apple Corporation engineer who thought remote viewing and ESP was completely silly. He had never done this before in his whole life. And I've translated his writing into script, intersection, notch or groove, wave, seawall, gap. This is his entire response. I've not taken the terrible stuff and hidden it from you. That's everything he said. All right, so what do we do with that? I can look at that all day long, and I challenge you, but have no idea what the target photograph is based on that material.
We know.
Pardon me? You've seen this before.
No.
Okay, here's how it was done. There were 5 pictures generated randomly. We used fuzzy set arithmetic to determine it, and Dick got it right. But the analyst has to decide which of these things. And it's usually not as straightforward as you think, and even in this case. There's waves. This is the only picture that has waves in it, guys, so why would you focus on the X?
The waterfall is also waves.
Well, hang on, just let me finish. All right, there's the windmill, all right? All right, here is, it's not waves in the traditional sense, but it's not even a sea wall, which is part of the response. It is a wall of water coming down a wall of rock. That's allegorical in some sense. And so Dick got it right, but when you are a blind judge to this, it is very, very difficult to do that because it depends upon which element you're going to pay attention to. All right? Well, Dick was right. Here's A gap would be what you'd see looking down on the city. And I was the judge in this case. I also got it right. That was the right answer. But I wanted to illustrate this is not usually straightforward. The amount of information you get in a given session is terrible, even worse than the telephone system in California, as I said earlier. Okay, total results. Here's for those people who are interested in the statistics. There were 20,000, we did 3 Apple engineers. The overall study was significant with an effect size of 0.53, which is really quite healthy. And we had one person that was individually, in his 8 trials, produced an effect size of 0.6. First time that people ever did it. So it was really remarkable. They went away scratching their head and said, this is still impossible, I'll go home and think about it. Okay, here's a case as part of our application-oriented research. The government wants to know if you could find someone who could do lucid dreaming and you instruct them before they go to bed that when you have a lucid dream, which is a dream you are aware of that you're dreaming while you're having that experience, you know, scoot out of the dream and go over and spy on the Soviet Union and tell us what you got and come back. Except in this case, we told the lucid dreamer, in the neighboring laboratory, there's an envelope on the wall, and inside that envelope is a photograph. So signal us with your eyes, which is what you can do when you're lucid dreaming, that you now are asleep and you're aware that you are lucid. This was monitored by Stephen LeBerge, one of the first people to really take lucid dreaming into the laboratory. And when you do that, get out of your dream bed, go next door, find the envelope, open it up, study the picture, come back, wiggle your eyes, we'll wake you up. Okay, so that all happened. We woke up this guy and he said, you know, could I search that laboratory next door? I could not find the envelope on the wall. But, he said, I realized this is a dream. Tell you what, I sort of clicked my heels together in his dream and he said, I want to go and stand where the photographer stood when he took the picture that's in the envelope I can't find. I am just reporting what this guy said. Whether he did any of that, who the hell knows? And so when we woke him up, he drew this picture. It's the only data that he had. Key mountain, barn, large cabin, shadows of mountains, trees, road, a path, American Rockies, or maybe the Alps. The picture that he couldn't find in the envelope was that. I'll tell you, I couldn't draw it that well looking at the damn picture. So I said to the guy, hey, you really screwed up. You missed the car. So here are the results that's for our decoy pictures, but here's the results of 21 trials that we did in this study with that effect size, which was not significantly different from being awake. And so Chuck Honorton invented the Ganzfeld for the same reason we've invented Get Away With This. Who wants to stay up all night while somebody's dreaming? We don't have to. So here, you know, please understand, and don't beat up on me, that this is not an academic proof of anything. It was an indication we should not go forward with lucid dreaming while we're spying. It just doesn't give you enough of an effect size. Okay. Here's Joe McMonagle. Joe McMonagle, in fact, he's interviewed, I won't tell you what he was, because in the 11-minute piece I'm about to show you, you'll learn everything you want to know about him anyway. Okay? This was Joe's first example on national television in the U.S. The program was called Put to the Test. It was on ABC national television in 1995. It was before it was released that we were working for the intelligence community. So he couldn't mention what we were doing and what happened. It was just simply a remote viewing on camera. And it was his first such remote viewing on camera, of which he's probably done hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating now. It was done real time. The producers spent $150,000 on this 11-minute experiment.
Extrasensory perception, ESP. We've all heard of someone who says they have it, and scientists from around the world have spent decades trying to explain it. Well, you're about to meet a man who claims to possess this extraordinary ability, and has allowed us to put him to the test. For most of his adult life, Joe McMonagle was a professional soldier. 2 brutal tours of Vietnam, U.S. Army intelligence, a Legion of Merit award winner, a black and white world, clearly defined and limited to his 5 senses. But in 1970, Joe claims that world was turned inside out. In a restaurant, Joe suddenly felt ill and staggered outside. This is the first time he's told his story on television.
It was sort of a pop, and I found myself standing on a cobblestone road watching the rain go through my hands, and looked up and saw my body sort of half in, half out of the doorway. I knew at that point that I was probably dead.
Joe was rushed to a hospital, where he arrived, showing no signs of life.
I felt as though I was falling backwards and was enveloped by a white light.
So here you are, you've almost died, and then all these strange things start happening to you. What's going through your mind?
It shattered all my concepts of reality. I started having spontaneous out-of-bodies. I'd lay down for a nap on the couch or something, and I just find myself suddenly out of my body, somewhere else, totally.
Joe also claims he started having other unexplainable experiences, like knowing what complete strangers were thinking. For 8 years, he kept his extrasensory perceptions to himself. Unbeknownst to Joe, 3,000 miles across the country, this man, Dr. Edwin May, and a select group of investigative scientists were just beginning to study extrasensory perception, ESP.
When I first got involved with this, I was very skeptical. I said, if this is real, it's critically important. After 20 years, I've come to the conclusion something interesting is going on.
How do you study ESP in the lab? Well, scientists developed an experiment called remote viewing. The person being tested is placed in a closed room. A researcher then goes to an unknown location, and the subject is asked to use ESP to draw what that researcher is seeing. Over the past 20 years, Dr. May has conducted thousands of these remote viewing experiments. In 1978, he started testing Joe McMoneagle, and Dr. May claims Joe has drawn scores of unknown sights, 50% of the time with remarkable and unexplainable success.
And one of his best hits, we had a person that was in the administration building at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. And all Joe drew was the laboratory, a perfect plan view of what this laboratory looks like. The interesting thing is, Joe's never been to Livermore. And this person could have been hiding anywhere in the entire continent of the USA. We've looked in the laboratory to figure out what's special about Joe. We've looked medically, neurophysiologically, physically, behaviorally, in every way one can look at a human being. And the good news is, Joe is boringly normal like the rest of us. But what we are proposing is that there is a sixth, an additional sense, that is responsible for what Joe does in the laboratory and in the real world.
Does Joe McMoneagle actually have a sixth sense, a sense which cannot be explained? To test his abilities, we flew him here to Houston, a city to which he's never been. For Joe, it would be like finding a needle in a haystack. The needle, a random location. The haystack, the 5,436 square miles that make up Greater Houston. We hired a movie location scout who spent 5 days finding a wide variety of distinct target sites.
I think all of them have dramatic Houston elements with very defined architectural styles. And, you know, one of the things that I did not want to do is repeat any common denominator. I did not want there to be 2 archways. I didn't want there to be 2 triangles in the visual.
Following Dr. May's scientific protocol, the producers reduced the hundreds of possible sites down to 4. A life-size treehouse on the George Ranch. A visually dramatic portion of the theme park Astro World. The Ship Channel at the Port of Houston Authority. And a famous local landmark, the Water Wall. Without Joe's knowledge, those locations were photographed and placed in numbered envelopes at our downtown headquarters. We hired Officer Bill Baker of the Houston Police Department to retain custody of those envelopes. Joe McMonagle sequestered in a windowless, soundproof room, we placed the 4 numbered envelopes in an adjacent room. To choose our final location, Julie Wiesen, a local marketing executive, was asked to roll the dice.
So the number is 2. So Officer Baker, why don't you take envelope number 2?
For the test, we selected Jessica Miller from the Houston Visitors Bureau to be what the scientists call the target person. Inside envelope number 2 was the photograph of the Houston Ship Channel. It would be Jessica's job to go to the target site and carefully observe every detail. In theory, through ESP, Joe might actually be able to see the location through Jessica's eyes. We would simultaneously record both Jessica and Joe. So while they drove, Joe began what he calls his cool-down period, similar to meditation, clearing his mind of all outside distractions. After 30 minutes, it was time for our test to begin. I had no knowledge of any of the locations.
We have been radioed that our crew and our target person are now on site. So I'm going to show you a picture.
This is our target person. Have you ever seen her before?
No, I've never seen her before.
Describe for us the environment that she's in.
For television purposes, we've condensed the 15-minute session. Remember, these are the 4 locations in the envelopes. But all Joe knows is that the location is anywhere in Greater Houston.
First impression of getting this kind of a, I'm going to call it a river for lack of a better name. My sense is that it's both natural and man-made, so there's probably been something done to this river. It's been dredged or seawalls, formal walls have been put up of some kind.
I didn't know it, but within moments, with just a few strokes of his pen, Joe had eliminated not only our 3 other locations, but the infinite number of possible sites around Houston. Now the question became, how detailed could he get?
Many vertical lines that are perpendicular one to the other, but the horizontal lines seem to have curves. The actual target itself is more on an incline.
Remember, at this moment, Joe is attempting to see what Jessica is seeing.
Now she's looking up. So there's something tall at the target. Keeps looking up at it. I want to say there's like a bridge nearby. My sense is the bridge isn't meant for traffic, not meant for people.
As you're going through this process, is this confined just to visual?
Some of it's visual, but some of it's also hearing or smells or taste or just sensations.
Towards the end of Joe's session, a huge cargo ship docked right in the middle of our location, dramatically altering the target site.
I'm just getting a lot of metallic noise. There's something else down here as well. It's a very, very large object. I don't think it's a building. I don't know what that is. But this is a very large object. It's tall, behind the part of the entry. And then I get sort of almost a specifically designed platform. I get a feeling like there's a black stripe down the center of it. This is about probably all I'm going to get on this target.
It was now time to go to the target site. Remember, Joe's impressions included a bridge, a river improved by man, seawalls, a very large object, and lots of metallic noise. When we arrived, we met Jessica, and unbelievably, we saw what she saw. A bridge, a river improved by man, a very large object, and a barge used for dredging. This is scary. Take a look at that, and then take a look at the barge in the water, and the shape of that.
Looks exactly like this.
Were you looking at that during the
I looked at that a lot because I, looked all down in that direction, so I did look at it a lot.
What really impresses me is large object. And I'm looking at this ship, and I can't believe it, because that's right on the nose. Now, in terms of the bridge, you said you thought it was more foot traffic than automobile?
That's obviously something twisted in the interpretation. Generally speaking, about 80% of what I do say usually turns out to be correct.
Are you pleased with the way this turned out?
Yeah, I'm pleased. I think out of all the places that we could have been around Houston, this is very much fits the picture of the area.
About 20% of what Joe does is as close to spectacular as I could possibly wish. Scientists don't like to use the term miracle very often, but this is as close to one as you can imagine.
Coincidence, chance, or an extrasensory ability that exists in all of us. If you were skeptical, like I was, then perhaps what Joe McGonigal accomplished today opened all of our minds just a bit. Reporting from the Houston Ship Channel, I'm Bill McEntee.
A couple of background stories on that. The location scout came to my lab in Palo Alto, and I spent probably 5 hours with her, giving her suggestions on how to pick targets, which she apparently used. I had no other action in this study whatsoever. There's one trial, it's not a study. And I called Joe up afterwards. I said, how are you doing? He said, I'm exhausted. And that turns out to be, I don't know if you guys see it or not, but doing remote viewing is exceptionally tiring. And that's why we only try to do one trial a day at best, usually a couple a week. The other background story in this, they all went out for drinks afterwards, and Joe said, well, I knew it was a ship, but you didn't report it. Can I put it back in there? And Joe said, no, it was not part of the record. It doesn't count.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think I saw a breach of protocol.
Which is?
The police officer saw the target and he's returning.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he was looking on the target.
When?
When they opened the envelope.
I don't think, was he standing there? I don't
Yeah.
remember. Okay, so, all right, fair enough. Was there an interaction between the police guy and anybody on the study?
Of course there wasn't, but I think the protocol is that they should open it only in the car.
Of course, and this was the first time the ABC people had done it, and they had nobody on side. I agree with you about it, well, I'm not arguing against it, but I'm just saying the context was an entertainment show. So that's, I agree with that issue. It's hard to do a perfect experiment, and this one has that minor flaw.
I know.
Okay. The other thing was that I asked Joe, when did you do, and it gets directly to the question you just asked, when did you do this remote viewing? And he says, if you think I'm going to do a real-time remote viewing on national television, you're full of it. I did it in a hotel over breakfast. Yeah, he did the remote viewing overnight, not the drawings, but he did the remote viewing in his head while he was having breakfast in the hotel before going to the studio to do this. So all the stuff was just as he remembered what he used to do it. And so that raises the question, when, look, here's a bigger issue, which is a research issue. If in fact it is true that we human beings have access to all information through all space and all time, and we were cognitively aware of it, we'd go crazy immediately. So the two questions that answer asks are, when does a psychic open that door slightly? And more importantly, when does that door close? Joe McMonagle has a suggestion about when it's open is the tasking, when you say to the subject, or even tomorrow we're going to come into the experiment doing a study, it's already open at that time. What I think closes it, and if you're interested, I can tell you there's an experiment that we're designing that can get at the question that the feedback, not necessarily to the person, but the feedback, when it's designated as the feedback, probably close that door. And there's a way to test that in the laboratory. But so they're really important questions that you asked.
Sounds like Schrodinger's cat.
Pardon me?
It sounds like Schrodinger's cat to me.
I don't know.
The observational theory, I think.
And it's not true until you look in the box.
We can argue about that one.
He doesn't like that.
Okay. Someone asked earlier, we did some spying simulations where it's a technology target, because we were asked, can you use remote viewing to detect directed beam energy weapon systems in Russia? We did two such things, and they spent 56K euros for each of the two sessions. So it's quite nice. So there are two trials, one a year apart. Protocol outline, Joe McMonagle was a subject, and all we had was a social security number, which is social security number, which is something in the U.S. if you work, that's what you have. Otherwise unknown. 4 sessions were conducted 8 hours apart, beginning at midnight one night to the following midnight. We did the analysis with what's called fuzzy set analysis, and I won't bore you with the details of that. But basically, we compute 2 things, actually 3 things. The accuracy, what percentage of the target was correctly described by the response? And the target was defined by the Air Force, who funded this work. We didn't define it, they did. Then the reliability is, of all the things the subject says when they are giving you the response, what fraction of that is correct? So it turns out a good measure of the quality of the work is what we call the figure of merit, which is you multiply those 2 numbers together. And when Joe said he gets 80%, you'll see why here. This trial I'm not going to show you, but it's close to 80% reliability. That was an electron accelerator near Livermore, California. This is what I'm going to show you, a 1 gigahertz microwave generator in the state of New Mexico. And again, it's pretty similar to the size of what he's done. It was remarkably consistent. Okay, this is not all of his response. This is a fraction of it, and I'll translate some of it. 6 by 4 centimeters. Had he said inches, it would have been correct. Wrapped environment. Measurement of shock waves. Wavefront emitter. General effect size overall emitter. If all you had was this data and you wondered what was going on in some secret place in Russia, you'd say, well, we're not sure, but we better have something to detect microwaves. Because that looks like a microwave waveform. The picture on the right looks like a microwave horn. The site was that. Okay. And there were a lot of other people with more standard techniques looking in on this study. We were the only one that got it right. Yeah.
I was wondering, was Joe aware that it could be high energy?
He knew it was a technology target, but that said, it could have been anything. Rocket launches, power reactors.
But not landscapes?
No landscapes, no. It was high technology. Because again, it doesn't really quite qualify as an academic exercise. It was, can remote viewing detect directed beam energy weapon systems? And at least with these 2 trials, the answer was sort of yes. And along with other techniques. This is the secret facility in Fort Meade, Maryland, in which the remote viewing was done. It was an old World War II barracks. There was no sign of what was going on inside of it. It was falling down and quite a mess. But inside, it was pretty well appointed. Very secret, you know. The phone number wasn't there. It was a really strange environment to be in. This is a well-known American senator, Claiborne Pell, who was very much interested in the work. And the guy to the left of him is Darrell Graff, and those are top secret security safes along the wall. Okay, you can get a clue with the cartoon in the upper hand corner. We take this stuff extremely seriously. There's a Jewish Hungarian cowboy. I used to do this on the back of a galloping horse at rodeos. I still can do that, believe it or not. Joe is stubborn. I mean, you'll never meet a more stubborn guy than Joe McMonagle. He said, I'm not taking the damn plane home from Moscow. I'm riding home on my faithful steed. He's still there. Okay, here's a few examples, spine examples. The top numbers there are the geographical coordinates. In those days, they weren't encrypting them, but those were the actual geographical coordinates of a site. You won't be able to read that, but I'll show you this. Much to my surprise, I went to Google Earth with those coordinates, and the damn place is still there after 30 years. I've been working with Joe McMonagle since 1979, all the way up to a few weeks ago. Okay. So that's the pin of the corresponding to that geographical coordinate. He said there's a river, and there's a river right there. There's a building which is somewhat shaped like the one that he drew. He said there's a building northeast of it in the city of this other town located 3 kilometers northwest rather. That's not terribly impressive actually. Another example, Mr. Ingo's swan, instead of representing his experience in clay like I showed you earlier, he cut out a black paper and pasted it on white paper. And I took Google Earth and turned the picture to line up with the response. This was an airfield in Iran. Well, let's see, go back there. And he got it as an airfield next to a body of water, and satellite imagery in those days could get that as well. So this isn't of great intelligence value. But the next one is. In fact, I was giving a talk in Hong Kong at the end of 2018, and I was very hesitant, should I show this in Hong Kong? Because this was an operational target in China during the Cold War on a nuclear test. But I showed it anyway. You won't be able to see this. Some weeks preceding the event, precognition, what he said was the viewer was blind targeted on simply the words event of interest. No geographical coordinates, no nothing. Just tell us the event of interest, what do you got? A few days later, after the event, the viewer again was blind targeted on event of interest. Let's see. Result from the first one, in response to the advanced targeting, viewer correctly identified an event as a plane drop nuclear test event. That was exactly what the Chinese were doing. An airdrop, drop an atomic bomb, and let it go boom in the desert. That's what the area kind of looks like from Google Earth. This wasn't Ingo, this is someone I won't name. This person, 09, said, and part of his response was, it looks like Roman candles and fireworks that go whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And that's exactly what happens when you set fire to plutonium, but it doesn't go nuclear. So what they knew, this was an intelligence first, they knew that the bomb test failed. Okay. This one was done in the U.S. by the late Hella Hammond. Again, she has the coordinates. This raises a very interesting cognitive issue. That is, Hella has no idea what a rocket test is. She was an artist, a photographer. So she did the best she could. She drew it rather accurately. And that's the pin where I got it from Google Earth. There's smoke, rain-making machine. And she said it was a locomotive, an old steam locomotive, because it makes a lot of noise and dust and stuff. And that's exactly what was going on there. But she didn't have the vocabulary, which is really interesting, to describe her experience. And in the early work, Puthoff and Tard found a weak correlation of remote viewing skill with IQ, intelligence quotient. And what we think was going on with that, and people that have a higher IQ have a more richer vocabulary, can better describe their experiences. We think that was an artifact. Now, this has only been displayed once, so I want a show of hands. That is, I'm about to show you some secret that has not been shown. Will you all agree to keep it in this room right next to me? Come on! Do you have the CIA phone number?
I will not take pictures.
Theoretical physicist with powers of ESP stealing a thought experiment from a colleague. Do I get to choose one now?
Go ahead.
I want to show
Oh, wait. We are supposed to leave some time for questioning till 5 o'clock.
Okay, this will be really quick. It's just a bunch of slideshow on the Russians. All right?
The Russians, yeah.
I took that picture in St. Basil's at Red Square. It's really beautiful. Okay, that is General Alexei Yurovich Savin. He ran the Russian remote viewing program with 120 remote viewers in it. I said, hey Alex, don't you, with all those medals on your chest, how do you keep from falling on your face? He's now retired, that's what he looks like now. This was a group, Joe and I were there in Moscow, and these are Russian remote viewers. And The guy between the two in the back row, the tall guy, there's a strange looking guy. We have no idea where he was from. He was very quiet, wouldn't talk to us. This woman, well, you'll see. Some viewers, all women, there they take their remote viewers and give them weapons training. They give them hand-to-hand combat training. There's Elena Klimova, and we did one remote viewing with her. She's equally as good as Joe McMonagle was. And she's wearing a pin, which I'll tell you about in a second. But I said, hey, Alex, what about the word remote in remote viewing you don't understand? Because they took the remote viewers to the Chechnya war. He said, oh, but bullets are whizzing over their head. They're really motivated. I don't believe that at all, but that's what we did. Okay. That is group, the Romantic name 10,003. And if you know a little Cyrillic, that stands for General Staff at the bottom. And Joe and I are honorary members of this group. Yay. Okay, this is a quick slideshow. That is Alex and me. There's the guy on the right is Boris Ratnikov. I'll tell a quick story about Ratnikov. He's a Major General in the KGB. He was head of Yeltsin's security team. You don't think a KGB guy's being funny. This guy's a hoot. You'd like to have him over for dinner because he's a very funny guy. And he describes how his first job at the KGB, he was political officer on board a Soviet-era pleasure cruise boat. Who knew? I didn't even know they had them in those days. So they're out. His job was to keep people from defecting when they pulled into Western ports. That was his job. Okay. They're out in the middle of the Mediterranean, bored out of their minds. So they decided to hold a beauty contest on board the boat to pick Miss Cruise. Major Boris Ratnikov, KGB, dresses up in full drag, breasts, hips, makeup, wig, and enters the contest. And he wins! I said, hey, Boris, are you that cute in the dress? He says, I'm gorgeous in the dress, just like that. But the funny part was, he said when the other women on the boat found out that what had happened, they literally tried to drown him in the swimming pool. He had to fight for his life. So angry. The woman in the middle there is a part of the remote viewing team. Her name's Angela Ford, and the guy on the right-hand side is Nikolai Shum, second in command of KGB, who wrote a foreword for one of our books. This guy on the left is Tofik Dadashev. He is the KGB's top psychic in the 60s and 70s. And he's going to cooperate with us for remote viewing. He makes a hell of a lot of money. When I called him up, I know him pretty well. He said, oh, you're in town, great, I want to take you for dinner. I said, okay. So we went to a 5-star hotel right off Red Square, and we went to a steakhouse. And he brought his son, and there were 3 of us, and the meal probably cost $1,000 US. And he would not let me even hint at helping to pay that. So he's got a remote viewing business in South Moscow. He's obviously doing pretty well. The guy on the right is Yuri Gurgaev. He was former head of the Russian Academy of Sciences, speaks quite fluent English, thought this stuff was really hot stuff, and was in support of it. And when I first met him a number of years ago, he wanted me to come to the laboratory because our model of entropy, he's a solid state physicist, this guy. He wanted me to work with people there to see if we could build a chip that was psychic. And basically it was the language problem that kept it from happening. These are the 2 books, ESP Wars, East and West. You can buy it on Amazon for $4 US on Kindle. The Russian version on the other side says Side Wars, West and East, the other way around. And the Russian underneath said History from the Accounts of Eyewitnesses. We gave a talk in Moscow about this. And this is interesting. I don't know if you can see that. If you read Cyrillic, you can't see it well. It's Duma. It's the lower house in the Russian government, right? And if Lenin in his tomb on Red Square, if he could lift his head, look to the left, he'd see that. This is Christmas time. He would go crazy because this is Christmas. This is an important picture. Now that building is notoriously awful. It was the KGB headquarters in a prison called Lubyanka. Terribly awful place. People went in there, they were tortured mercilessly and never let out. But the Russians now are ashamed of it, so guess what? They changed the name of the building, good for them. What they didn't change was the metro stop to get there. So you go to Lubyanka stop to get to this place. And that's an important picture. That's Angela Ford, who was one of the U.S.'s top military intelligence analysts. And I thought it was kind of ironic to have her standing in front of that building. And there was one day where we were freezing cold. Most of the time in Moscow in 2017, it wasn't very much. That's it.
Okay.
Question and answer. Right?
Questions and answers, because there must be many questions, and we have another 50 minutes, so go ahead, fire. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Russians had 120 remote viewers, you said. How many did the Americans have?
At any given time, about 12.
12?
Yeah, or less.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Is the Russian program also closed?
Dead or the doornail, yes. And it's interesting, when I first met Alex, he was still working in the Ministry of Defense. And Larissa Valenskaya and I were there. We went into his classified room. He was in uniform. He says, come, I want to show you. We went into an adjacent room, and on a table was classified documents from the U.S. in English. I've never asked him how the hell did he get those. Maybe next time I see him, I'll ask him. Hang on a moment.
There was another question there. Yes, Mark.
We spent about 20 million euros on research, and you showed us that a lot of the research showed that there was nothing to be found. If you could give an advice to future researchers, what fields should they proceed and what fields do they definitely not proceed in researching?
Well, did I understand you correctly? You said there's no evidence that it actually works?
You proved that there was nothing to prove, but not that it didn't exist.
Who said that? No, I didn't.
What he claims is that it's evident that there is something, but it doesn't make sense to keep it proving.
Yeah. In fact,
again and again and again.
Yeah, I would say there's a handful of traditional parapsychology experiments we should never do again. And Ray Hyman, one of the sharpest critics we have in our field, agrees with this. And there's a handful, we might argue which ones and so on, so I won't enumerate them here. The next step is to figure out how in the world does this stuff actually work. And there are all kinds of things that we're doing in the neuroscience world to look at what's happening in the brain. Other people, like in your lab and elsewhere, are looking at better defining some of the things for psychokinesis and the front end of things. It's a wide open study. The problem we have, and I believe I'm unique, please correct me on this if I'm not, there's only one person in our field historically that had a genuine career. What I mean by career, I had a 20-year career where I was paid industrial scale wages with retirement benefits and medical benefits, and I had no other job but psi research or psi activity. That's a career. I don't think there's anybody else in the field can make that.
Dean, maybe?
Pardon me?
Dean?
No, gosh, no.
Okay.
Not the length of time.
Neither me.
Yeah. So what? And that's not to brag at you. It saddens me because if you have a bunch of young students, I would definitely advise them, don't go into this field. You cannot make a living working in this field. And so I'm hoping that bright new people will say, well, wait a minute, let's go forward in some other directions. And I know you're working in that, others too, are trying to get this more identified in the, quote, mainstream scientific community. It's not the public. The public buys all this stuff, frankly, too much. But the mainstream scientific community, primarily psychologists, say no. Yeah.
Why were these programs aborted if some useful things came out of the military?
Would they do it again, you remember that?
Why these programs were aborted? Why
I don't know why the Russians were. I do know a lot why ours were. And it's written up extensively in this book, but I can just tell you. I had originally thought, when the CIA analyzed all our work, it was dreadful. They said, oh, well, it should be the academic community. It never really helped in remote viewing spying, blah, blah, blah. And I went to the fellow who wrote the foreword to this. It was then Senator William Cohen in the Senate. And I walked in the door, and he's waving that report around, and he says, can you rebuff this? I said, yes. So I wrote an article, and virtually everything I said in that article was wrong. What we found is, years later, that the director of intelligence in the CIA, the structure is, here's this director of Central Intelligence, and he has two deputies, one for intelligence and one for operations. The intelligence people are the analysts who figure out what's going on. And the director for intelligence said, no way in hell are we going to take this program when Stargate closed. We're not going to take it. Why? Because Congress was threatening to close the CIA. They were really angry at the CIA because they had all these memos from Congress written here. Were saying, you at the CIA are too thinly spread out your stuff. The money's going down, people are leaving. Please don't accept any more new programs. That's why they did it. Now, Joe McMonagle and I spent a decade after our program closed to try to get something real started again quietly to do, because Alex wanted to have a joint program on counterterrorism. And I went to the head of Defense Intelligence Agency, said, hey, look, this guy wants to do a joint program, it's cheap. I could hear it going into the wastebasket before I exited his office. But we spent a decade to get things happening. Two things happened there. The working people who used this product loved it. They wanted to get something new going, especially counterterrorism. But it was killed at the upper level boardroom, so to speak. Really frustrating.
Like you said, the CIA was the funding agency.
It only funded.
Was mainly the DIA.
Yeah, it was mainly the DIA and the Army Medical Research and Development Command. The CIA was 1% of our funding. But Congress ordered them to take the program, and they said, we're not taking it, so it closed. Now, why the Russians closed, I don't know. I'll ask Alex next time I see him.
I would like to make a remark that most people maybe that are reading the journal, our journal, know about this, but you are asking for an explanation of these phenomena. And of course, we have some theoretical.
Well, there are lots of theoretical.
We have about 4 or 5 serious theories around. And what's nice is that within next week, actually, that's also why he is here in Europe, we will have a workshop for the first time in the field of parapsychology, combining basically the theoretical people with the experimental people and forcing them to talk with each other. I mean, they have been combined.
Do we have to? Honestly,
They have to. And the reason, and the way we do this is that at this workshop, the presentations are 50% of the time, and the remainder is discussion time. So we don't have this seating, we will be seated in a round, so we will be facing each other, and that stimulates discussion. Because in the past we didn't have that, let's say, experimental outcomes did influence theories, nor did theories influence experimental approaches. And that's horrible, because that's the basis of science. And I'm really happy that we have now for the first time this workshop where I think we will return with a number of
I hope so.
many good ideas. Among those ideas, the answer to Marco's question, what are the most promising avenues to go? What kind of experiments will bring theories further, and what kind of theories will drive experimental research further? So there is hope. There's hope for the future.
I have a question. What was the decision on who gives presentations and who doesn't?
I think that the internal policies that you are asking for.
No, I mean, I was specifically told I couldn't present something, so I'm kind of curious why not.
You couldn't present something.
Yeah,
you have to.
No, I'm not presenting anything there.
You're multiphasic experiment.
No, no one taught. In fact, I was explicitly forbidden by Mario. He said, you can't give a presentation. It's purely a discussion time. This was all brand new to me. I mean, I can talk all day long about it if you want to present it.
There's a confusion there. You have 20 minutes presentation, 20 minutes discussion.
You saw one of the things there is multiphasic model of precognition. I can summarize it.
No. Don't do that.
Sir, under the many explanations of this subject, is there also a stream explaining the thing out of the spiritual, now
Yes,
the spirits aside,
We have
spirits as real entities.
we have a presentation on two theoretical approaches that start from the, let's say, the mental experiences, and this is the PMIR model, and
That is
the
spiritual, PMI, or Rick Stanford.
well, it's starting from the mind's side.
So it's
I'm talking about
And there are three.
spirits.
Well, we don't have theories that are not refutable. And that's basically no theories that whatever you measure, it will always you cannot refute the theory. You understand? That's basically it's a
In Nederlands.
verwerken. We willen verweerbare theorieën. We willen theorieën die door experimenten te verwerpen zijn. Geestentheorieën zijn dat per definitie niet. Dat is jammer, ze kunnen nog wel steeds.
Geestentheorieën kunnen wel worden bevestigd. Het gaat toch niet om de ontkenning van een theorie, het gaat om de bevestiging van een theorie.
Dat is een bepaalde.
Ik denk dat het wetenschappelijk proces een onjuiste basis heeft.
There are two people in the U.S. who are deeply involved in both reincarnation research and in mediumship. Julie Bashel, I think it's the way you pronounce her name. She does magnificent work looking at certified mediums. I love her work. I'm on her science advisory board, even though I don't buy the story. She does really good work. The other one is the late Ian Stevenson in the U.S. He was a medical doctor who did virtually his entire career looking at reincarnation studies. And he published a monograph, which has been recently republished on Amazon, called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. I don't buy that story. I read these 20 cases and I said, we're done. These are really interesting. It requires some sort of explanation.
There will be a theory by Gertzel trying to explain that.
But what Stevenson said, when you have a set of data, you cannot focus on one cherished hypothesis. You have to have other hypotheses that might explain the same data. The modern language for that is called living agent psi, which means the individual had psychic ability to find out what the other person was, rather than having been reborn. And even Stevenson himself did not know how to resolve those two issues. So it's an open thing.
That's what I said.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, you've done this work for 30, 40 years.
Precies.
What are your hypotheses?
My hypothesis?
Yeah, because you said it's difficult to explain, but you must have thought about it for so long.
Oh, sure, but not reincarnation.
No, I mean about this.
Yeah.
I'm a remote
We have a
How does it
model
work?
that I'm now discovering I'm going to present in a few days in Paris that suggests the following. It's a very unpopular model because I'm a lazy guy. And I'm lazy in the sense, if we don't have to invent something new, don't do it unless the old stuff doesn't have a hope of explaining. All of our sensory apparatus that we're aware of are signal-based. You are hearing me because my vocal cords are shaking the air that go to your ears and so on. That's signaling. Same with sitting on the beach and watching the sun set or rise wherever you are. Those things are signal-based. So we said, okay, maybe psi is signal-based, and we have evidence to support that. I'll just describe it briefly. All of our known sensory systems are much better at detecting changes at their front ends than they are steady state. In fact, the visual system is even worse than that. You don't know your eyes are doing this all the time, and if you could stop your eyes from doing that, your experience would be total darkness. All right? So I said, well, if that's true, is there anything about psi that it works better when whatever that thing is that's changing compared to whenever that same thing is static? The answer is yes. We found it in 7 different experiments. The change of entropy, I'll explain what that is in a minute, of the target system correlates significantly, although weakly, with the quality of remote viewing, but the entropy itself does not. So the key take-home message of that is we found something, whatever it is, you don't need to know the details, that acts like a sensory system. In other words, size proportional to the thing changing compared to when the thing is not changing, like all other sensory systems. So our model is based on signal. Now, that said, it's a hell of a problem to figure out how the hell, what's the carrier of a target being generated in India tomorrow? How does that get from there then to here now? Have not a real clue. Yeah.
I was wondering, somebody asked me, did somebody already do an LST, local serial time analysis on your data? Because they are...
We have, and Spottiswoode did it already as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you know what that local sidereal time is? Navigators have been using it, you know, way back when you guys were running around the earth, conquering everything. The navigators knew about that. It's the position of a star right overhead, and that changes every day, about 4 minutes a day as it slides about. But what Spottiswoode found, David Spottiswoode is a physicist living in LA and worked on our data, that surprisingly enough, I can show you pictures of it, that there should not be any effect as a function of local sidereal time, because it's an arbitrary geometry thing in space. It should not work, but it does. At 13.5 hours local sidereal time, there's a, I've forgotten the actual numbers, 7-fold increase in remote viewing statistically, some large number like that. And at 18 hours, nothing. And not only in our lab, but across the planet on different types of Gonsfelds, and didn't work so well in card guessing.
We don't have data from Southern Hemisphere.
That's the problem.
Which is very, that's a pity, because that would really nail it.
I agree. I'm not sure what it is, but I do know one thing. If there's been correlation study by Ryan, what's his name? Adrian Ryan. He's done some really good work. You know, when you have a compass and it points north, if you could look at it, the end of the compass is wiggling ever so slightly, and that's called the geomagnetic field fluctuations. It's very, very tiny. You could probably examine the head of a real compass, you'd never see it. And what it was first seen by Persinger in the experiential data, but it was seen in the laboratory, that if you plot remote viewing, how good it is, as a function of the geomagnetic field fluctuations, and the correlation is really crummy. Except at 13.5 hours, it goes from 0.06 down to -0.3. It's a huge spike downward. And one of our researcher friends, Marilyn Schlitz, did a study a long time ago. She got a 0.9 correlation, -1. We said, you know, hey, Marilyn, you made a mistake. Just by luck, she happened to do it at 13 hours LST. So we don't know. James Spottiswoode is very clever. He's a very clever guy. By doing very clever electromagnetic shielding, you can change the field fluctuations to 0. You can buck them out. And he built a platform in the outside of LA, 6 feet off, 2 meters off the ground, and you could be in there and there'd be no geomagnetic field fluctuations. And the larger the fluctuations, the worse the remote viewing. So wouldn't it be better? And he didn't use selected subject, the bastard, and blew it. So it's still
nothing came out of it.
Nothing came out of it, yes.
Can you continue about the geomagnetic fluctuations? The geomagnetic fluctuations.
Yeah.
Because that's also affected by the solar effects and strong variations.
All kinds of stuff.
And there are some publications that might be related to the electrobiological field in the humans.
Yeah.
And that could perhaps be the carrier of the related extremely low frequency radio waves.
Yes.
Could perhaps be the carrier of telepathic signals.
You know who first proposed that? Ippolit Mosevich Kogan in the U.S. and the USSR in 1969. We actually conducted a deep dive in the ocean test of that. But James Spottiswoode has published a paper with a neuroscientist on the correlation of onset of epileptic seizures as a function of geomagnetic field fluctuations.
Okay.
Really interesting.
Yeah, that's also, but an issue is also that the ELF is the only radio signal that can be used to use submarines, and shielding is extremely difficult. So all the shielding that's applied to these PIA experiments
but there's a
would
problem
not
with
work on the ELF.
It won't help you at all with precognition.
Yeah.
You're screwed with that. And you can't, we got about a 40 dB down, at 10 hertz, we got a 40 dB shielding by going, I forgot, 300 meters underwater, which is where we did a test with that. Okay. Got really good results.
Thank you.
Talking about epilepsy, one of the most interesting spontaneous cases, or at least experiments that have never been published because the author was too scared to publish, and actually his boss said, "You are not allowed to publish this." It was a neurologist who was working in an epileptic center, so where people were studied that had epilepsy to a degree that they were obliged, or they had to get an operation. So what they do then is they open the skull, and in this case each patient that would be operated on the next day or 2 days from now, they got depth electrodes installed in the brain to see how the epileptic seizures developed, so that they could pinpoint the place where they had to cut into the brain tissue. And what they did with these electrodes, they measured the brain activity pretty deep in the brain, and they stimulated the subjects with all kinds of images, like erotic images and neutral images, and maybe you remember that was basically exactly what we did when we did studies in presentiment, and we found some seconds before the stimulus, we found already that an emotional picture would appear, randomly selected. What he found was this guy, this very strange epileptic guy. He had epileptic seizures each few minutes, continuously basically, and on top of that he continuously had deja vu experiences. So it was a really strange subject, and he found there an incredible, robust presentiment signal. Really, if you look at it, he sent me the data, it's incredible. I couldn't believe it. But it made me think that basically when we are thinking about how in the brain, how we would experience the time running backwards, which is one of the basic proposals in the theoretical process of psi, that for some strange reason time may run backwards temporarily. Now, if you try to imagine how that would look like, or how you would experience that, if you have short moments of time running backwards, then you get deja vu. Basically, that's what it is. So maybe everybody has deja vu. Maybe we all have experienced retrocausality and the paranormal phenomena to some degree that other people are trying to measure and measure, but we just experience it.
I'd like to speak a little bit about epilepsy. My colleague, Sonali Bhattmarwa, she's a PhD clinical psychologist, and at the age of 18 she had a brain tumor, which was fortunately benign, but they sort of semi-butchered her when they operated. She had all kinds of grand mal seizures and epilepsy, and now here it is, she's 58 years old, still has them, not grand mals, but just complex partial seizures for the most part. And even when we communicate by a video chat room twice a day, and once a week she'll have a seizure on camera. But she's not ashamed of it, so I have permission to tell that. But I did a test. We were at just a table meeting like we're going to have down there, and she went into seizure, and she was sitting across from me, and she put her head down like that. I went over and sat next to her, and her leg wiggles like this, and she weeps out of one eye. And the whole experience, I thought, lasted probably less than 10 seconds. Very quick, it's done. When we were home, back to where we were living, I stayed with her and her family. And she said, "Oh God, I'm so embarrassed that thing lasted 20 minutes. I said, "No, it didn't. It was probably 10 seconds. So I did a time assessment study with her informally. She routinely overestimates by a factor of 2 timing. I mean, not just the seizure timing, but estimate. Every time. It's utterly amazing. So maybe there's a connection there.
Okay, well, I am afraid we have to stop because this university closes down at 5. Okay, I hope to see you again.